Welcome to the ROI Masterclass, the podcast where vision meets strategy and bold moves create measurable results. I'm Liat Siegel, interior designer and ROI strategist with 17 years of experience. I help businesses transform properties and ideas into high-performing assets. This show is specifically for real estate investors, hospitality operators, and boutique developers who aren't afraid to take risks, challenge the status quo, and demand a return on every decision they make. Each and every week, we talk with innovators and leaders across industries about the strategies and the insights and really all the unconventional thinking that turns potential into profit every single time. If you believe that smart design, decisive leadership, and strategic risk are the keys to real ROI, you're in the exact right place. Let's dive in. Today's guest is Melissa Dorange, founder of Humming Host, a short-term rental management company specializing in unique, well-designed multifamily condo units. Melissa brings a collaborative, market-savvy approach to property management, focusing on balancing standout design with operational efficiency and guest comfort in highly competitive markets. Thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here and for this conversation.
Thank you. Excited too. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background, what you do specifically, and what aspect of ROI is your lever?
I'm originally from France and I've always worked in hospitality in different markets, from Paris to London to New York and now in Nashville, Tennessee. And I started my career in traditional hotels. And during COVID, I actually pivoted into short-term rentals. And now I own a short-term rental property management company. And yeah, like you said, we are positioned more high-end luxury condos in Nashville, Tennessee, mainly, but also in Vail, Colorado.
So what makes a property luxury?
Good question. So we define a luxury property as property that has amenities first. So luxury amenities, like you can imagine in a residential condo building, pool, gym, parking, are luxury amenities that we advertise, and that helps a lot with the revenue. And also inside the unit, professionally designed. That's one of our standards. We want it professionally designed so that it stands out on Airbnb, but it also provides better experience to the guests.
And why have something professionally designed versus a lot of people think that they can DIY and it will also become luxury? What's the difference between a professional that getting it done versus somebody wanting to do it themselves, especially wanting to save money and make sure that their profit margins are still there?
Yeah, you can definitely design your own unit and have a lot of success. For me, professionally designed is going to bring the extra quality and the extra vibe that is going to make a difference and that is going to attract the clientele that we want to attract. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, like, I'm not a professional designer and I could never mix patterns and materials and colors the way a professional designer does. And that really get you to the next level.
Do you work with the designers alongside them? Property management perspective, what insights do you give them in order to strategically plan out a unit?
In some cases, owners have already picked their designer and they're working very closely with them and they do not request for our input. But in other cases, when we bring the designer to the owner, because we have a few designers we partner with, we can bring to the table. And in that case, yes, we partner closely with the designer and with the owner. So as a property manager, I am interested in a few things that to me are going to make a difference. So for instance, the bed types, the bed arrangement is going to be very important. And if we have the right bed arrangement in a unit, we can increase our occupancy. So that's super important. OS&Es, as far as like linens, sheets, pots and pans, like how you stock your kitchen and things like that also make a difference. And so I would usually, if I bring on my own designer or a partner designer we partner with, I would tell them to take care of the FF&E and make the unit look beautiful. And we take care of all the shopping lists that we can find on Amazon that is not going to make a difference if it's professional design or not for a short-term rental. And we would take care of this part. So we have standards. We always have the same amenities that we provide in all our units. And it helps our brand. It helps the designer because it's probably the most boring part. And we collaborate, if they need special colors for comforters or blankets, we definitely collaborate, but we can definitely take on this part.
So what kind of amenities or things that you program into each unit do you see has the biggest impact? So you mentioned the bedding or the kitchen. What kind of setup for the beds do you find people want the most?
First of all, it depends on the type of property and where you're located. It's not the same people who visit. We're based mostly in Nashville, so I'm going to take Nashville as an example. It's not the same people who are going to visit Nashville and want to be close to Vanderbilt Medical Center, for example, than it is for people who want to be close to downtown. And so this is something to take into account. Downtown is going to attract more groups, younger groups, but also if you're close to the Music City Center, you will also have the opportunity to host people who travel for conferences during the week. That usually happens during the week. And so this is where it comes. You want to maximize the capacity. So if you permit that allows you to accommodate 10 guests, you want to be able to accommodate 10 guests, but you might not want to put bunk beds in every bedroom, because during the week, what we see bring the most occupancy is colleagues who travel together and who each need a bed, and they will prefer to have their own bed versus a bunk bed. So king size bed to me is always a priority. If you have a primary bedroom, have a king size bed. Go for smaller than king. If you have the space, just go for king size bed. Reduce your table, your bedside table, but have the king size bed.
Unless you're in New York. In New York, everything.
In Nashville, we have a little bit more space still. But yeah, king size beds are better than queen. And if you have enough space to have a double queen bed, for example, it's better to have 2 queen size beds side by side where you can accommodate 4 guests on the weekend, but also 2 guests during the week, or 1 guest who's going to just rent that room because they want their own bed. So you have more versatility by not having bunk beds all over the place. In some cases, if you have 4 bedrooms, keep 1 bedroom to do as many bunk beds as you can, but the other 3 bedrooms should have more elevated design.
And what about, let's move over to the living room and dining room area. What about that? How can someone optimize that?
In markets where holidays are important and bring a lot of clients, it's better if you have a dining table, right? If you think, if I want to rent on Thanksgiving, on Christmas, on Easter, etc., and I have a nice oven, I have a really nice kitchen, because that's the point of renting a short-term rental, right? You have access to a full kitchen. So I will want to have a nice dining table and chairs so that you can also host families. Outside of holidays, I would say that the dining table is not the most desirable amenity, but it's nice to have to actually be able to rent on those holidays that sometimes it's times where we are struggling to rent. Things like that are important. I've also noticed that sometimes a couch, a specific couch, whether it is the color or whether it looks so comfortable, when you look at the pictures, actually can make a difference too. So the quality of the couch can make a difference as well.
That's huge. I mean, a lot of Airbnb hosts or short-term, midterm rental hosts will opt for the least expensive furniture because it just makes sense in terms of getting it all set up. With something like a sofa, where quality is so important, especially if it's 8-way hand-tied or it has performance fabric for longevity, do you guys invest more in certain items like the bed or the sofa, or perhaps an extendable dining table for locations where you attract families or multi-generational? Do you invest more in those pieces, or do you still find that it's important to keep costs down because you're having to replace it every few years anyways?
Yes, so it really depends. We know that outdoor furniture, for example, is very expensive, can be very pricey. And here you can go 2 different routes. You can go cheap and replace as much as needed, or you can go very expensive and have long-lasting furniture. I think both are doable, and it really depends on the owner what they want to do. As far as beds, when you change a bed, you have to retake photos. So if a bed breaks in the middle of a stay, it's like panic mode. So beds are so important, and it's probably also because I have more a hotel background. We always say a hotel room is small. If there's only 3 things you need to provide, is a good shower, a good Wi-Fi, and a good bed. These are the essentials that you cannot miss. And to me, it works also for a short-term rental. The quality of the sleep is so important. But also, if you think operationally speaking, we don't want a bed that breaks in the middle of a stay.
That would be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. So if you have an outdoor chair that breaks during a stay, okay, not ideal, but Okay, might happen, but a bed, you don't want that. A couch, it all depends if you think your guests are gonna stay in the unit or are just gonna be in and out. So I was mentioning earlier, being close to a medical center brings people who are here to rest after surgery, for example. They will want comfort. They will want to have a nice couch. They will want to have a TV in every room. They will want to have the fireplace. They will want to have comfort. A big group that goes in and out the unit might not be too interested in having the most comfortable couch, but it all depends on who you target and who you rent the unit to.
Our oldest two were both in the hospital when they were little, and they had a Ronald McDonald house nearby. And so that was really hard when they were in the hospital and needing to have that respite and going to a place that it was so stressful. I mean, my oldest was in the hospital, I think at 9 days old, especially for families who have loved ones in the hospital. That, you know, that's another subset of people that are using the space. You want to think of how you're designing, how you're setting up, what things does that particular market need. You cannot, in my mind, have a cookie cutter design. Yes, we want to systemize and have these things as repeatable systems, but it has to be layered with customization in mind for each and every market. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
So how do you see that working into your design plans when working with your team, with a designer? Are you guys looking at and collaborating on that specific market and figuring out how to set up the design strategically?
Yes, I mean, I leave the designer super free. I'm not very involved, but I always like to have a preliminary conversation about who is going to use the space and who are the guests who we are going to host. You know, whether it's families or if you have a townhouse with, like I am in today, with 4 floors. Well, maybe not families, maybe people with disability. This is going to be more groups. So then you can go a little bit more bold groups, younger groups, etc. Bachelorette, bachelor parties, birthdays, etc. So yeah, so we look at the place, we look at the location, and then we just have a conversation with the designer. These are the people we think are gonna come and stay with us. So then he, the designer, can take that into account in their design.
Do you systemize on your end, like you were saying about the shopping lists and the beds and all of that? Do you systemize? And if you do, how do you create that for repeatable implementation?
Yes, very simple. We have an Excel spreadsheet with a list of items. Depending on the size of the unit, we have a quantity, so how many items we need of each. And we share that with the owner, who then is going to buy, and we receive, we unpack, we put everything in the property. And usually I add comments of why we chose that particular plates. We want the plates to be to go into the dishwasher, right? The last thing you want is a plate or a bowl that is not dishwasher safe. These are little things that are very stupid, but not everybody think about. So yeah, that's what we do. Very, very simple.
And in terms of the kitchen, I didn't ask you before. We were talking about the beds, the living room, dining room. What about the kitchen? Is there anything that you see really impacting ROI for what is like a must-have in order to, like, aside for the dishwasher safe dishes, what else can property owners put into their units?
I love reading a review that says, and we get a lot of those, we know it's important for guests. The kitchen is very important in short-term rentals, because the reason why you would go to a short-term rental versus a hotel, one of the reasons, you know, outside of the fact that you can have many people in the same space and save money, is that you have access to a kitchen, so you can cook and save money. I don't have to go out every single lunch and dinner. And so I love seeing the review that says the kitchen had absolutely everything we needed. And so when you think about that, everything you would need is what you would have in your own kitchen. You know, it's not more complicated than that. But like, I use a blender a lot, you know, because I love to make hot sauce. You want to make a smoothie? Can you make a smoothie in that kitchen? You want to have not just one, but several bottle openers. If one doesn't work, you know, you want an extra one, you want a backup. But yeah, every single drawer and cabinet should have something and should have enough. So if you have a house that can accommodate 12 guests, you don't want to open your cabinet and only see 6 plates. You want to see 24 plates, 2 per person. That's kind of our standard, 2 per person, 24 glasses. And listen, for example, we are in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, we like to have bourbon glasses, not just water glass and wine glass. So things like that are always thoughtful and that guests really appreciate and are going to actually mention in their review. If you have a hot tub on the roof, your guests to have access to plastic cups so that they can bring to the roof, they can bring to the hot tub, it's safe. If you accommodate families, you also want to have plates that can be used by families or kids that are BPA free. Think about those things. You don't want to poison them.
I love that. It's so thoughtful, the way that you're thinking about every little detail. I would say that you're going beyond property management. It's very strategic and very ROI focused because it ultimately does affect the reviews. Can you share with us maybe what you do to really step it up and get those high level reviews, or maybe a challenge that you faced that you had to figure out how to overcome and how to adjust your systems so that you could continuously get better and better reviews?
So reviews have different components. It's usually it's about the service and how quickly we answered the guests, how quickly we were to help them if they had an issue. It's also how we set up the place and how we make sure everything works properly before the guests arrive. So it actually starts there. Before your guests arrive, we put a lot of time in inspecting the properties at checkout, quick inspection at checkout to make sure there's no maintenance issues or anything obvious that's going to need attention and need to be fixed before the next guest. And then check-in inspection, which is before the check-in. And here we're going to insist more on the cleanliness and that everything is there and not missing. It happened to us in the past that we were not checking every single time that there were extra bedding, for example, for sleeper sofas. And that could lead to bad review, but it's not necessarily a bad review, but your team has to go back sometimes late because it's when your guests go to bed that they see that it's missing. So that's something, for instance, that I'm thinking of that we included into our checklist to check. If a guest requests a special amenity that you like to provide, for example, a crib, and you miss that, that's also something we really don't want. So it happened to us once and we never again. Because if you put yourself in your guest's shoes, it's a family, they arrive, they need a crib, their baby is probably crying, they are tired from their travel and they don't have the crib. Not good.
I'm curious if you have any technologies in place that help with all of that. And, in terms of whether it's communication or staying on top of things, like if you can leave our audience with top 3 things that you would recommend if they either wanted to start a short-term rental, mid-term rental, or they're wanting to optimize what they have already.
As far as technology goes, the lock is the most important. You really don't want to have issues with codes generation. That's the first impression, is how the guest can access the place, and they will comment badly if the check-in was not smooth. So the lock is super important. I don't know if I'm allowed to give you brands, but I think there are brands that are a little bit more efficient and work a little bit better than others.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you could share with our audience maybe a few brands that you would recommend, because that is a huge deal for check-in. I know for me in the past, when I've checked into an Airbnb that hasn't been smooth, or like it was stuck or something like that, that was really frustrating.
Yes, we definitely have a preference for Schlage or Schlage, however you pronounce it, that have been the most reliable locks, even though they're not necessarily the sexiest or the nicest looking ones, but they have been the most reliable in our case. And Yale, we also work with Yale, which before we had like a bridge connected to the Wi-Fi to make the lock smart. And now they have the ones with built-in Wi-Fi, and it's so much better since that happened.
Share with our audience also if there's any additional technology in terms of managing a team and the lists and all the systems that you have on the back end.
Yeah, so as property managers, we want a property management system that is going to be very similar to a hotel, where you can, I would say, as much integration as you can have is the best. If you can manage everything through one platform, it is beautiful. So whether it is guest communication, pricing, maintenance and cleaning modules, and of course, channel management to avoid any double booking. So every time you have a reservation on one channel, it closes the calendar for the other channels. That's definitely the most basic, important thing that a property management system should do is have the channel management. So I would say as much possible integrated so that you don't work with multiple tools. But for maintenance and cleaning, we've worked with Breezeway forever and we really love it. And the team loves it because of the flexibility you have. And actually, most of our standard operating procedures come from using that tool. It's been working very well for us. But if you can have a maintenance and cleaning tool integrated into your property management system and it's robust enough and flexible enough, I think that's great,
What property management system do you like best?
I wouldn't be able to choose because there are so many and I think each one has weaknesses and strengths. So to be very honest, we're always looking into other systems and see if others could be better. I've worked with two so far. One that's more better for hotels, so boutique hotels, or if you have a small short-term rental building and you want to manage it like a hotel with room types. I've worked with one, and then one that's more like short-term rentals. So really for short-term rental, each short-term rental is different and unique and different location, etc. I don't have a preference, and I don't think I tried enough different softwares to tell you which one is the best.
So I tried like so many different softwares for many different things. So I think that it's really cool to see how AI and technology is really changing how we can operate more efficiently today. I'm fascinated by that aspect of how to manage short-term and mid-term rentals more efficiently. So can you share with us, with our audience, before you go, like your 3 top tips for if they're wanting to start a short-term, mid-term rental, or they're managing now but want to optimize it?
First thing that comes to my mind is, as a property management company, you are a marketplace between owners and guests. So you do have 2 very different clients, the owners and the guests. And so I would spend a lot of time thinking about what I call the owner's journey and the guest journey. So the owner's journey is everything from getting qualified leads, make sure they're aligned with the type of company you want and with the type of brand you want to build, and then up to day-to-day management. So everything from lead to day-to-day management. What is your owner going to want to talk about? What are his priorities, and how are you going to educate him, but also lead him from the first step to the day-to-day? And guest is going to be from the time they look into your portfolio to the time they check out of your unit, and actually even a bit after checkout, because you also need to consider what if there is a lost and found left, sometimes valuable, or how can I drive this guest to come back? I would say, owner's journey, guest journey, always think you have those 2 clients and both are very important. You don't have a business without owners. You also cannot satisfy your owners if you don't have guests coming to your place. So that would be my recommendation. I know it's a little bit broad, but there are so many aspects to consider that I think everybody is in different position, and use what you do great. Be excellent at this. Sometimes a property manager comes from the tech world and wants to develop his own tech. Well, great. If that's what you love doing, that's going to be your strength. Just do it. Sometimes they come from guest services like me. I came from hospitality. Probably that's where our strength is the strongest. It's the guest services and how we treat our guests, the guest experience. And sometimes it's real estate. And if you're very good at real estate and your owners are going to be the ones buying, selling with you, and you're going to grow like that, then great. Develop that. That's amazing. And find help for the other aspects, which is going to be your guests, who's going to help you make the guest experience excellent. Because you need both. You need owner's experience and guest experience, and they both need to be very, very high.
I have one last question for you. Is it possible in today's market to drive direct bookings, or is it more profitable to just figure out using websites like Airbnb or VRBO to drive traffic and drive bookings?
A really good question. I think we all ask ourselves these questions on a daily basis. How can I drive more direct bookings? I would say it really depends on the market you are in. I find it a little bit easier to drive direct bookings when you have a market that's like a ski resort or beach, where you're going to have repetitive business. We know that, if you love going skiing to the same place every year and you find a place that you really love, you're going to book it again. And sometimes you're going to book 1 year in advance, or 6 months in advance. So if you're in this type of market, and on top of that, you offer, like, your accommodation is very unique. There is a lot to do. In our case, urban, city, condos, and a lot of Nashville is very transient city. I think it's a little bit harder for us to increase our direct bookings. I think if you have anywhere between 10 and 15% of direct bookings, you're doing an awesome job. And you do this by having your own website and redirect people who stay with us to the website. So if they stayed with us, you can reach out to them. You have their email address. Gathering the email address and the contact details is super helpful and super important. And there are different ways to get there with technology. You can. So there are Wi-Fi hubs where you have to enter your email before you can use the Wi-Fi. And so that's a good way to collect email addresses. In our case, we just ask our guests if they are willing to share their email and their phone number. Having this database is super important. And then it's using that database to audiences on Meta and Google search. You can run paid ads and you can really target the right people, because if you have enough mailing list that's actually big enough, you can feed that to Meta and say, hey, build me a lookalike audience. And so all the people who came to me, better than me what the criteria, and what they have in common. And so build me a lookalike audience, and then I can target those people if I do a paid ad. That's how I've been trying to do it.
That's genius. Because for anyone who isn't familiar with Meta paid ads, if you have a list of people that are your target audience, it has an idea of things that they're interested in, websites that they visit, what they like, where they're located, all of these kind of things. There is information, there's data on that, and it will build another audience that looks exactly like it, or it will retarget those people to get them to come back and book again, but perhaps through a direct booking where you have an incentive for them to direct book rather than going through Airbnb or VRBO or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so how do you give the message to your guests that going to your website is always going to be the best for them because it's best rates? And for us, for example, you don't pay until 2 weeks prior to arrival if you book directly with us. So if you want to book now for April 2026, you won't get charged. So you can book now, secure the place, and then figure out with your group who pays what. You have more time. If you book on a channel, an OTA, usually you have to pay upfront, and it could be 50% or 25%, and then they charge the rest, but you do need to pay something. So I think that's an added value of booking direct. And for us also to generate more direct bookings, we automatically include free early check-in and free early checkout if you book direct with us. So if it's available, it's free. If you book directly with us, it's like a little perk to thank people to book directly with us. So yeah.
That's fabulous because that also increases ROI and you get a better profitability, better profit margins from that.
Yep.
So much for all your insights. You shared so much wisdom with us today. If our audience wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
By email, melissa@humminghost.com, or Instagram, Humminghost Rentals.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me.